Hello and welcome to this typewriter video where we'll be comparing the Triumph Matura Super against the Olympia SG-1. Between the two, the Olympia SG-1 is from 1953, which is only 2 years into its production line, and the Triumph Matura Super is also early from its production line, which is 1961. So, let's get into these typewriters, what kind of features they have, what they kind of look like, what the details are, how they typically work, the functions, and how they feel when you use them. So let's start to talk a little bit about the Triumph Matura Super first. As far as feature-wise, the keyboard doesn't have a lot of it. It does have a tabulator system with decimal functions. Besides that, it doesn't have particularly any functions of mention. It has a color selector that is either black or red, or whatever other color you have on your ribbon. But it's interesting that it doesn't seem to have a stencil mode, which is default on just about any typewriter I've seen. Beyond that, the machine has a fairly clean operating system inside it with a segment shift basket. It's just typical DIN 2103 spools, which is just about any German-made machine that wasn't specifically made for the American market would use those. The thing about this typewriter is I'm not 100% sure how the ribbon reverse would actually work, because it doesn't on my machine. I found this from a man who'd been storing it in an attic for about 30 years, so it was in not the best state when I found it. It cleaned up surprisingly well, I must say though. To the carriage itself, it has the return arm, which is very neatly positioned just above the lid, so it will move your rows behind. What it varies, how it differs from the Olympia is, the Olympia has its arm positioned quite a way out to the side, while this points straight forward. This changes by using this lever, which can change how many rows the lever is, how many rows up the lever actually moves the platen. So this would move it even more, and this would move it the most. And you pull it back and then back up to change whatever setting it is. The carriage release mechanism is a flimsy feeling kind of plastic button, and besides that it has a paper feed arm which can drastically forward how much paper is inserted. So the idea of that would be that you put your paper into the paper feed and then you would pull this lever and you would be ready to type in the exact same and the correct spot every time. The thing about that, because this typewriter has been living 30 years in an attic, the paper feed rolls, which is the small rolls underneath the platen, had completely deteriorated, so I've created new ones using electrician's tape, and it hasn't gone super well in terms of grip for this arm. So it works when I've actually managed to feed the paper somewhat through the system already, but when you just leave it there, it doesn't really grip enough. Beyond that, it's the typical twist to change. You have the release arm, which disengages the ratcheting mechanism, so you can rotate the platen as much as you want. You can listen how it makes ratcheting noises now, and if I disengage, it doesn't. It has the ability to remove the carriage quite easily, which is also typical for the big standards. It has two buttons right here, which is just pushed in and snapped into place, which leaves the carriage free to be removed. Just lift straight up, and there you have the escapement mechanism and every other internal, so it means it becomes quite simple to service the machine, clean it. So you put it back and make sure that it is all the way secured into its spots, and then make sure the keys come back out and the carriage is secured back again. The platen is fairly easily removed, although the Triumph and the Adler versions of this both have a problem that admittedly most standards with this type of platen removal has, and that is that it just freezes up, very much so. So I struggled quite a bit with this one, but I got it open, and the trick is that you use these knobs. So this one goes counterclockwise to be unscrewed, and this one on this side would go the same counterclockwise, being screwed open like so until you get it all the way out. Let's see, all the way out, just like that. Now the platen, if I do the same thing on the left side, the platen is released and you can just pull it out, which is very simple compared to many, especially portable types. There's no need for a screwdriver to remove this, and then just screw it back until it's actually set. Make sure it sets properly, and the same with the left. Yeah. It also has the typical margins, which works the same way any other margin does. Just push down and move sideways, and that sets how far to the sides you can move these. You'll notice that on mine it just suddenly slid past its point here. That's because this typewriter was stored in an attic for 30 years. I don't know if I've mentioned. I know I mentioned it. Yep. Finally, on the side of the carriage, there is a lever beneath. Let's see if I can get it into view. There's a small lever underneath the paper feed thing right here. And by pushing this all the way up, you nullify any tab sets. So say you have 5 tabs along the paper, you use this lever up and remove them all in one swoop, instead of having to find each tabulator and then remove it using the minus. Alright, let's have a look at the SG1. Alright, so this is the SG1 from Olympia. This was made in 1953. So, or rather, the width of the keyboard is the same, but each individual key is slightly smaller than on the Triumph. It also has the decimal tab systems, but this one has a few more decimals. While the Triumph Matura goes to 100,000, this can do up to 100,000, but then 1,000,000 and 10 million as well. It also has a color selector, which is on this one working through a wheel, but interesting, it has a third option for the third color, so to say. It's not an actual color. What it is an in-between point. So it would have black for the top, red for the bottom, and yellow for the middle of it. Now that's not because you were supposed to be able to make text that was both black and red. It was, you would have a ribbon that would be, for example, all the way black. You would type on it until it started to fade, choose red until that started to fade, and then you could also choose yellow, which would be the middle, until that also started to fade using the middle of the ribbon. Now, when you have a black and red, you have to use either or, which means there will be a section in the middle that is unutilized, and some typewriter makers, they recognize this and they created the in-between option to maximize ribbon usage, which was very useful because that meant that you could write 33% more before having to change your ribbon. Unlike the Triumph, it also has a stencil mode, a white mode, which means when you type, the ribbon does not move up. On the right side, it also has a tension or a touch measurement, or a setter. I have it in the middle on 5, but the idea is you can use this to flip it up to like 1, which would be the lowest setting, meaning it would not be as hard to press the key and move it. Moving it further up to, for example, 8 would be the maximum, which would mean more tension in the lever, so you would feel more pressure. It would be harder to push the key, but on the plus side, there would be more tension in the spring, which would mean that the type arm would be pulled back with more force, meaning you could type faster, basically. It would get out of the way quicker. This, just like the Triumph, this is also segment shift. And just like the Triumph, this machine also has a little bit of a few problems. And the only major problem that can be quite annoying is that whenever I use the shift key, specifically or particularly the right shift, you can notice that the spacebar actually moves when I press it all the way down. And if I do it quickly, I can actually manage to trigger space sometimes. It's not supposed to do that. I haven't been able to figure out why it does that, but it's not a feature of the typewriter. So let's try to ignore that for the time being. Other than that, the return arm, like I said, sticks out quite a few bit more than the Triumph, and you can see it moves quite a bit in before it actually hits something to start rolling platen. It doesn't have a lever to change how many rows you move. It has a wheel that you can start pulling backwards, and what it does is it changes how early the return arm actually engages. So right now it's on 1, and you can see I get it all the way back here before it does anything. Now I take it to 2, and you can see it's even less so, and all the way up to 3, and it's almost immediate. So 3 would move the platen all the way 3 up, but 1 would only move 1 up. It too has a paper release mechanism. No, sorry, not a paper release. It has the paper injector. It also has a wheel on the side which determines how many rows up the paper injector is actually supposed to move the paper. And unlike my Triumph, it works. So let's use the side of paper that isn't bent, put in place, and write it like that. Secondly, another thing I want to mention with this particular SG is that this is, unlike most SGs, it has quite a narrow carriage. Most SG1s that on the market, or not on the market, but in circulation with enthusiasts, would be more like this in width. So this was pretty much intended only for this size paper. This platen removes in the exact same way as the Triumph's platen. The problem is, while I have spent some time and some lubrication with penetrating oil and whatnot to get the platen off on the Triumph, I have not been able to do that on the Olympia. So far it is stuck, so I haven't been able to remove that. Other than that, you can see also that the Olympia at some point had some noise cancelling or at least dampening material inside the lid, but it has all but deteriorated completely. To the point where I actually used a vacuum cleaner to remove the foam that was in here at some point. So at some point this was a mat that you cut and rolled out and glued into this place, but just like in a Selectric, it has turned to powder and it just came off. I mentioned it has a segment shift. It also needs more cleaning. This typewriter has only been cleaned enough to make it work. I haven't given it the same kind of polish and shine that I've given the Triumph yet. I only got this a few weeks ago, which is why I'm making this video now. Beyond that, this one also has one more feature that the Triumph does not as far as I've been able to tell at least, which is a double space, meaning the standard would be that you could write your typical sentence. Let's try to zoom this just a little bit in, see if we can get you closer to the text. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy... Right, now I moved the margin, didn't I? Dog. Alright. But, say now you want to make a headline. A fancy headline. This button right here. Yeah, can't really see that, can you? This one. It doesn't look like anything you've, like, the keys you've seen because it has some notches in it. So what you would do with this is push it down and flip it in, and you'll notice it stays down. See what happens when I type now. Suddenly, you can see that, let's see if I can get you closer. The text has now become double-spaced, which is a nice and fun feature. So that is a big point in direction of the Olympia. It has more features. It has more bells and whistles. You can use the triple-spaced ribbon. Yeah, in terms of features, or at least numbers of features, the Olympia SG-1 wins that battle. It also manages to type quite quickly and nicely. I enjoy the... It's a little bit steep this way, like how I think it's a 5 centimeter raise from the lower row to the upper row, while on the Triumph it's just 4 centimeters. I will move on to the test now, or rather where I won't actually speak. I will just film myself typing my go-to sentence or my go-to typeface thing. Okay, now, it is a little bit sensitive to the rhythm, meaning when I type, sometimes the escapement hasn't triggered fast enough, which means that when I type out things, for example, right here, you can see on B nothing, something has gone a little bit wrong here. I was a little bit fast when it came to making the capital I, so I unleashed the shift before I was done typing, and there's this bit of an extra space between R and E, which is also because I typically have typed the R before the escapement was done moving forward. But other than that, it feels very smooth. I can type fairly quickly. I feel my fingers are hitting the marks. They feel nice against the keys. The snap is satisfying after the pattern, and all in all, this machine deserves all the praise it gets from the typewriter community. So, But moving on to the Triumph, how does that feel? Alright, let's try this. Okay, that didn't go as smoothly and as well as the Olympia, as you may have noticed. So remember what I said about how these keys are, they don't have the rough texture on them anymore. So they have been worn down, so they're smooth to the touch. And I mentioned how my finger slipped sometimes. And whenever my finger slips like that, it sometimes hits more key than one, which means it may actually bunch up and lock, as you saw happened like twice, maybe thrice. And that is, of course, not great for this. It's not really the typewriter's fault that it has been worn down like that, plus it also speaks mountains of my typing technique, so that should be on me. Like I said, I feel like it has more tension in it, in a way, and there's something with how it generates momentum that feels like the machine is actually working in the team with me. It's just supporting and helping me to create the right momentum for it. I also noticed that even though this typewriter has, like I've mentioned several times over, been stored in an attic for 30 years, so there was rust on the rails of this, but even if there was, it moves so smoothly along the rails, and I would say more smoothly so than the Olympia. The Olympia there's something about the tension in it. It might be just that it has more pull in the mainspring. Maybe it's just loaded more, I don't know. That could be it. But on the whole, the Carriage feels better on this. I also think, in terms of how it feels to push down a key, I like the Triumph Matura better, but there's something about the keyboard that makes me miss keys more than on the Olympia. Now, it could also be that I've just finished writing an 8-page letter on the Olympia, so my fingers are honed in on the keys of the Olympia and not so much on this. Because they're both very good. Very, very good. And they have qualities. The Olympia has the Triumph beat in terms of features. It has more bells and whistles and can do more. It has the double spacing. It has the triple spaced ribbon collector selector. A better way of controlling how many rows the return arm moves. The return arm on the Triumph is better than the Olympia in that it immediately actuates as soon as you use it. It doesn't wait with it. The Olympia's has dead space before it actually actuates. It doesn't matter that much, but this wins that. There's something about the way it feels to push the buttons on the Triumph that feels a little bit more satisfying. It's like you're pushing some clockwork, and you can sort of feel like there's some sort of help going on in there. Slight victory for the Triumph in terms of how it feels to press the key. But, having said that, there is something about the layout of the Olympia, at least like I tested it now, that allowed me to type faster and more accurately on the Olympia than I could on the Triumph. So the Olympia allowed me to type faster. I don't know if that's just because I was more used to the Olympia while I was typing. I wrote my, like a 7-page letter on this. I wrote my wedding speech on this. And when I did that, it went really well. So it could just be that my fingers right now are attuned to the Olympia and instead of the Triumph. In conclusion, they're both great. The visual aesthetics, I actually really like the aesthetics of this. And I'm sorry about that sound. That is a cat who wants to join. Fine, just be quiet. This is Tyr. Tyr is a chinchilla Persian cat. We have many nicknames for him, but among them is Rage Monster and Battle Beast. I don't think I can determine a winner between these two. They're both great. I think the Triumph has the iconic 60s look, and it really nails it, in my opinion. I really like that. It's more, this model in particular, after spending so much time in an attic, has some wear and tear on it that isn't great. The Olympia looks, like the Triumph, it's very typical design for its day. It's very 50s. It's got that nailed down. It's in a better state overall than the Triumph. It's been taken care of more. There is some rust here and there inside it, but the Triumph had a lot more of it, so that's not really comparable. Well, I hope it was interesting, at least. So that's that. Maybe someday I'll try to make another one of these, but considering how much I messed around with this and how much I'm not good with words, at least not spoken words, that will remains to be seen. And so how about it? So this is Tyr. Yep. What's up? And I can't reach the other one right now. So have a good one. Bye bye.